what college did you go to, and what did you end up majoring in?
I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago Circle, and they didn't have a journalism school. So
Okay.
I majored in because we didn't really have the money to send me downstate to Illinois or were really almost anywhere else, and so we went to the commuter school, the University of Illinois, but the the campus in Chicago is called the Circle, and they didn't have journalism. So I majored in speech and communications, but what I also did was get on the school newspaper.
Mm.
And I had been in my high school years, I was editor of the high school paper. So I got on to the college paper, became sports editor, and ultimately became editor of the paper. And that was where, to be honest, I spent way more time at the newspaper than I did in classes. Um, yeah. And because I felt like that was what I was learning, and I wanted to go into journalism. So it left me about, I don't know, 6 or 7 credits short of graduating, which I never felt obligated to go back and do, because I got a newspaper job after my senior year, and so just going back, so I couldn't. I was so anxious to take this newspaper job that going back and corralling those credits didn't seem uh, important to me. It was important to my mother, God bless her, who came from another generation and felt that college degrees were very important. So she was not pleased with my decision.
Maybe later down the line, you'll get those last.
Hey, maybe I'll go back for it. Now you got a good idea. That's what I'm going to do. If I retire from this, you know what? I'll just go back and get those credits. Make my mother feel good wherever she is.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So as you mentioned, in the '70s, you started working for a newspaper. You even worked for a few magazines. How did you like being a journalist? Because I'm a journalist myself.
Mm-hmm.
How was that experience for you
Did
back
you
then?
start at print or digital? Did you start that way before you started doing these kinds of podcasts and things?
Yeah, I started off print. I worked for a few newspapers and magazines, but as you
Mm-hmm.
know, journalism now does not pay.
It's different. It's very different. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really hard to make a career out of it,
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is this is
You
my
have to almost
passion,
have to
and
move
I do it
into it.
this way. I like it. I like it. I like it this way. It's fine with me.
You like
It's
one?
I like it this way. It's I like it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I enjoyed, my goal was to be a sports writer for one of the daily newspapers. And for some reason, I just couldn't. I gained a lot of experience with the community newspapers over the course of, I worked for a decade uh, as a in the community newspapers, the learner newspapers, which was the major one there, and we did 2 newspapers a week. It wasn't a daily paper, but it was a very successful chain of community papers, and I was I worked as a reporter, then I worked as news editor, and then eventually one of it was a chain of newspapers where they had about 5 blocks of papers that covered specific areas. So I was in the area just outside Chicago, it was in Skokie, and we had about 5 towns in our our domain, and I became managing editor of that part of the newspaper. And all the while, I'm doing hard news, and I want to do sports, so I started freelancing with sports and doing stories for the Washington Star. I did stories for, and I ultimately wrote for Ring Magazine, just covering fights, those little sections they had. And then I started writing for KO Magazine, which doesn't exist anymore, and that's where I really got a chance to write some stories that where I would cover major fights, and that was really cool.
Oh,
I
awesome.
like being a journalist, but it was it comes, as you know from doing it, it comes with certain obligations and certain things that grind you a little bit, right? And when I became the editor, then I really felt like I wasn't writing as much because I was editor, and I had these people working for me that were all older than me. I was in my 20s, which is ridiculous that I was managing editor in my 20s. So these people were all older than me. That felt odd. And I had trying to figure out a way to get through that was interesting. But I wouldn't trade those years though, because I really feel like it was an important part of my life. I feel like I did the job well as a community newspaper editor, which is different than being, a daily newspaper editor. And I to this day, I'm proud of what I did. But when I got done with it, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I just said, you know what, I'm going to do something else. And that was when the ESPN thing kind of came about.